Hey guys, tonight we will wander somewhere your history books barely whisper about. A quiet, prehistoric forest where you can actually hear the river thinking to itself as it winds past a tiny village hidden in the trees. You're not scrolling, you're not answering messages, you're just breathing damp green air while thin threads of smoke curl up through the canopy. In real life, if you were teleported here, you probably wouldn't survive the first week. No electricity, no hot showers, and absolutely no delivery apps. But here, it's safe, soft, and slow, like someone turned the volume down on the whole world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of the forest, and it feels like the world is exhaling. The trees are ancient and tall, their trunks dark with moss, their crowns knitting together into a gentle, green ceiling that drinks in the last light of the day. The air is cool but not cold, smelling of wet bark, crushed ferns, and a faint hint of wood smoke drifting somewhere ahead. Under your feet, the ground is springy, layered with leaves from 1,000 seasons. The forest doesn't roar or shout, it just murmurs. Somewhere off to your right, the river talks quietly to itself, sliding over stones, swirling around fallen branches, never in a hurry. You follow that sound because in a place like this, the river is the closest thing to a road. Every step feels like it carries you further away from streetlights and traffic and group chats, and deeper into a world that only knows seasons and shadows and the path of the sun. As you walk, you notice how soft everything is. The light is soft, filtered through layers of leaves. The sounds are soft too. A distant bird calling once, then deciding that's enough. The tiny patter of something small moving in the undergrowth. Your own breath as it falls into rhythm with the forest. Even your thoughts start to put their phones on silent and sit down politely. Then you see it, a thin bluish column rising through the branches ahead, wobbly and delicate, like someone drawing a line to the sky with a piece of fog. Smoke. Not the angry, choking sort that comes from engines or factories, but a gentle hearthfire smoke, carrying the smell of baked something and roasted something else. It curls and loops and disappears into the high branches, as if the forest is tasting it and quietly approving. You follow the smoke until shapes begin to separate from the trees. At first you think they're just bushes or hummocks of moss, but then you realize they're huts, low, rounded shelters tucked among the trunks, their roofs a patchwork of leaves, bark, and woven branches. They look like forest-grown mushrooms that decided to try real estate. Some are so close to the river, you can see the water flash between them, catching the last silver light of dusk. The village doesn't shout its existence. There are no gates, no walls, no big sign saying, "Welcome to prehistoric village population," however many we remember today. It just is. Huts rest where the ground dips gently. Small clearings open where roots allow. The paths are simply the places where feet have passed so often that the leaves have agreed to stay out of the way. You pause at the tree line and just listen. The river murmurs steadily. Like background music the forest has been looping for centuries. A fire pops somewhere, sending a brief shimmer of orange through the trees. You hear the soft clink of stone on stone, a low murmur of voices, the sudden bright laugh of a child that quickly fades back into the leafy hush. Nothing is loud, but nothing is completely silent either. It's a conversation between water, air, and people who have learned not to talk over them. You step closer, and the smells grow richer. Wood smoke, yes, but also something nutty and warm, something earthy and roasted. The kind of smell that tells you very calmly that even though you're thousands of years out of your comfort zone, someone here knows how to cook, and you will not, in fact, starve tonight. A little thread of relief runs through you because apparently your brain is the same in prehistory. First question is always, okay, but what's for dinner? No one rushes toward you. There's no dramatic drum beat, no spears pointed at your chest, no slow zoom in on your worried face. Instead, a couple of figures by one of the fires glance up, see you, and then turn back to what they're doing with a casualness that says, "Oh, another traveler following the river? Sure, that happens. You're not an emergency. You're just new." The forest seems to approve, the smoke keeps drifting, and the river keeps talking to the stones. As you stand there, half in the trees and half in the village light, you realize that time feels different here. Your own century, with all its buzzing devices and urgent notifications, suddenly feels like a loud party happening in another building. In this place, there is only dusk, the slow blooming of firelight, and the quiet promise that if you keep walking forward, the people of this village will make space for you beside their hearths. So, you take a breath, feel the cool, damp air fill your lungs, and step fully into the circle of smoke, light, and river murmurs, into a night that has no need to hurry anywhere at all. You step fully between the first two huts, and the forest closes behind you like a soft green curtain. The village isn't big, it just feels tucked in, like someone cupped their hands around a patch of ground and whispered, "Stay small, stay safe." Low shelters hunch close to the earth, roofs made of overlapping fern fronds and broad leaves that still glisten from the day's mist. Thin threads of smoke drift lazily upward, unbothered by any wind. The huts are simple but clever. Woven branches make curved walls, gaps are stuffed with moss and clay. Doorways are low enough that you'd have to bow to enter, as if every visit is a tiny act of respect. As you pass one, warmth brushes your face. Inside, an orange hearth glows, painting shifting patterns on the walls while something thick and fragrant bubbles in a blackened clay pot. Your stomach takes notes. No one asks who you are. There's no security check, no sign in here, just a woman by that doorway who looks up, meets your eyes, and gives the smallest nod. Her hair is braided back with a strip of bark, her wrists ringed with thin, polished bits of shell. The nod says very clearly, "You exist. That's enough for now." It's the prehistoric version of being added to a group chat without an announcement. Under your feet, the paths feel grown rather than built. The ground is stamped flat in some places, soft with leaves in others. Roots rise where they please, daring anyone to complain. These routes aren't designed. They're remembered, pressed into the earth by years of walking between fire, river, and sleep. Here is the track where people carry baskets. There is the shortcut kids take when they think no one is watching. To one side stands a wooden rack on 4 carved legs. Strips of river fish hang from it, glistening faintly in the firelight. Smoke from a nearby hearth drifts past in slow, lazy ribbons, curling around each piece before slipping higher into the trees. The smell is rich and salty, the kind of smell that makes you suddenly aware of exactly how long it's been since lunch in your own timeline. Prehistory doesn't do snacks on demand, it does patience. A second rack holds bundles of plants tied with twisted fiber. Leaves, stems, small flowers, they hang upside down in orderly rows, turning bright green to muted shades of forest tea. A sharp, minty scent mingles with deeper, earthy notes. You don't know which bundle cures headaches or which one fixes a twisted ankle, but someone here does. Their calendar is scent, not screens. Their pharmacy is the forest. As you wander, you notice that every path seems to lean toward one sound. You'll think you're walking randomly between huts, then catch a flash of moving silver between their shadows. Turn another corner and the murmur of water grows louder. It's like the ground itself is gently suggesting, "This way, please," toward the river. No one has drawn a map, yet everything here follows the same invisible pull. You follow it too, letting your feet drift until the huts thin out and the earth slopes downward. The river appears as a broad, dark ribbon, its surface catching the last of the fading light. It isn't deep enough to be frightening, but it's strong enough to matter. Water slides over stones with a constant low conversation, never quite repeating itself, like a storyteller who loves improvising around the same theme. Beside the bank, a reed basket sits filled with smooth stones, sorted by size and color. Nearby, another basket holds nuts, shells, and dried something or other. Nothing is dumped or scattered. Everything is placed where tired hands will reach for it later without thinking. Behind you, light footsteps patter past. 2 children streak toward the water, bare feet whispering against the ground. One carries a tiny sling, the leather pouch swinging. The other has a stick that is, obviously, the best stick in the world today. They slow when they see you, staring for a moment with frank curiosity. Then one of them flashes a quick grin, half shy, half mischievous, before both bolt down the bank again, laughter trailing behind them like a loose ribbon. Somewhere inside your chest, your own pace shifts. Your shoulders drop. Your thoughts stop sprinting laps. You stand there between huts and river, smoke and water, and you can feel how everything in this little place is arranged around a few simple anchors: heat, food, shelter, the steady pulse of the river's voice. Every path curves back to those things. Every day weaves itself around them. For the first time in a while, you let yourself imagine a life where your own paths did the same, where you walked not from meeting to meeting, but from hearth to water and back again. You breathe in damp fern, wood smoke, and river air, and when you exhale, some of your own century goes with it, disappearing into the evening like another thin thread of smoke. You're still watching the last stone skip and sink when you sense someone else on the bank. Not danger, just attention, like the forest has turned its head. You look back toward the huts and see a man standing a few paces away, part shadow, part ember glow. He's not huge or dramatic. His tunic is smoke-colored hide, worn soft at the edges. His limbs are lean, marked by pale scratches where branches refuse to move. He looks like someone whose whole gym routine is called daily life. His eyes are the quiet part. They rest on you steadily, curious but unbothered, the way you might watch a new bend in the river. No suspicion, no panic, just checking if you're hungry, hurt, or about to fall in. He lifts a hand in greeting, palm outward, fingers relaxed. You nod back because it seems rude not to, and something between you settles with almost comic ease. As he steps closer, you hear the faint clink of the objects at his belt. A twisted fiber cord holds small hanging shapes, a flat disc of bone, a tiny antler carving, a smooth pebble bound in leather. They tap each other as he walks, a soft, constant rhythm that says he rarely walks alone. He tilts his head toward the river path, then turns as if the invitation is obvious. Walk with me. There's no speech, no dramatic gesture, just his back, already moving at a pace that assumes you'll follow if you want to. You do. The two of you slip along the edge of the huts until they thin out and the river takes over the soundscape again. Water murmurs to your right, forest breathes to your left, and village voices fade into a warm, distant murmur behind you. The hunter says nothing, but his stride feels like part of that same layered conversation. He stops at a patch of damp sand where the river has recently pulled away. Crouching, he taps the ground twice and glances up, making sure you're watching. You squat beside him, fully enrolled now in whatever lesson this is. At first, you see only mud. Then he traces around a flattened oval, and your brain clicks, a footprint. Beside it, a smaller set, lighter, half skipping. He touches the larger print, gestures toward the village, touches the smaller, flicks his chin the way the children ran. Adult and child, walking this same path not long ago. He moves his finger a little farther, tiny bird tracks scribbled toward the water and vanish. A long groove marks where something heavy was dragged. A faint curved set of claw marks comes from the trees, stops at the shoreline, then turns away. He taps one of his bone charms, then the clawed track, then nods toward the darkening forest. Night drinker, cautious, passing through. You straighten and the whole bank feels different. It's not just something you stand on, it's a notebook. Every step leaves a line. Every dragged basket, every hopping bird is a sentence. The hunter reads it without words, you're just now learning the alphabet. He rises and walks on. This time you watch more carefully. You notice reeds trimmed neatly where someone cut them for weaving. A patch of grass flattened against a tree where a back rested. A rough scoop in the soil where someone dug for roots. Nothing is dramatic, but together it feels like you're walking through the village's to-do list. The path bends closer to the river. Here the water runs almost at arm's reach, sliding over pale stones with a soft hiss. The hunter stoops and picks up what looks like any other river stone, until he turns it and you see one side chipped into a clean, bright edge. He places it in your palm. It's heavier than you expect, cool and deliberate. He mimes scraping, drawing the edge down an invisible hide, trimming imaginary fibers. No speech, yet the meaning is obvious. This cuts, cleans, shapes. It's work and safety packed into a piece of rock. You imagine his hands on some earlier day tapping this stone over and over with another, listening for the brittle little sound that means the edge is right. No tutorial, no manual, just patience stitched directly to survival. When he takes it back and tucks it into a pouch, your hand feels oddly light, as if you've just set down a responsibility you didn't know you were holding. The two of you loop slowly back toward the glow of the fires. Smoke threads lift into the darkening canopy. Voices drift in low waves. At your side, his charms click quietly with each step, marking time more gently than any clock you've owned. Somewhere along that walk, your breathing falls into the same unhurried rhythm as his. The river sets the tempo, the forest shapes the melody, and you, temporary guest, accidental time traveler, find yourself moving in step with a hunter whose quiet eyes can read mud like a storybook and treat your arrival as nothing more complicated than one more footprint added to the page. You follow the hunter back between the huts, feet finding the same soft groove in the earth. Night is slipping in. The sky above the trees has turned a deep blue, and firelight flickers along trunks and woven walls. Smoke hangs low and gentle, carrying the smell of charred wood, warm stone, and something toasted that makes your stomach tighten with interest. At the center of the village, a wide hearth glows. Stones ring a shallow bed of coals, their edges cracked from years of heat. The fire burns steadily, more like breathing than roaring. Flat rocks rest above part of it, and on those rocks thin discs of dough puff and spot with brown. You realize you've walked straight into the earliest version of a bakery. No sign, no cue, just the smell calling you in. A woman kneels by the hearth with a broad clay bowl in front of her. The bowl is rough and thumb-printed, fitting her hands better than anything smooth ever could. Inside, a lump of dough waits. She pinches off a piece, rolls it into a ball, presses it flat, turns it, smooths the edges. Her movements are quiet and sure. Press, turn, lay on stone. A soft hiss, a curl of steam, and the air grows sweeter. The hunter speaks low to her and tilts his head toward you. She studies you for a heartbeat, then pats the ground beside her. That single gesture is your invitation. You sit on the packed earth, close enough for the heat to seep into your legs. People drift in without ceremony. A child folds themselves down on your other side. An older man eases onto a log opposite. Others settle wherever there is space. In moments, there is a loose ring of bodies around the fire, shoulders almost touching. Firelight paints faces in gold and shadow, glinting on beads of shell and little charms of bone. You can feel the day letting go of them, the way it has started letting go of you. To your right, the older man tends several skewers of river fish. The fish are small and silver, cleaned and threaded carefully so they hang at just the right distance from the coals. Their skins blister and brown, making a steady, contented crackle. Now and then he turns a stick with a smooth piece of wood, never rushing, never poking to check. He simply knows when the color is right. In a world without timers and recipes, this quiet knowing is the only cooking show anyone needs. Someone presses a warm stone into your hands. It fits your palms exactly, radiating a slow, comfortable heat. A moment later, the woman lifts one of the finished breads from the rock and places it on your stone. That's your plate. No pattern, no logo, just warmth and function. The bread moves around the circle in a simple rhythm: tear, offer, accept, nod. When your turn comes, you hold out both hands and a piece lands there, light and hot. You bite in. The outside is thin and smoky, the inside is soft and chewy with a faint sweetness from ground grain or root. It tastes of work and patience and fire. Your body answers with a straightforward yes that ignores every modern rule about carbs. A share of fish follows, laid beside your bread. The flesh flakes easily under your fingers, clean and tender, with a sharp green hint of herbs and the deeper comfort of real hunger being met. Around you, conversation begins to flow in low tones. You don't know the words, but you know the pattern. A short line, a murmur of reply, a pause while everyone listens to the crackle of the fire and the river murmuring beyond the huts. Laughter rises now and then, soft and quick, and fades again before it can disturb the calm. The hunter speaks more here, hands sketching arcs in the air, the curve of a track, the leap of an animal, and the others follow the invisible story written in his gestures and smoke. When the last crumbs vanish, people lean back a little, slower and quieter than before. The air is cool at your back, warm on your cheeks. Smoke climbs in thin silver threads through the leaves and disappears into the dark, taking the sharp edges of the day with it. Somewhere unseen, the river keeps talking to itself, the same steady sound that brought you here. Sitting with the warm stone cooling in your hands and food resting comfortably in your belly, you feel how everything in this village curves back to this fire. Paths, tasks, worries, all of it returns here to be softened and made simple again. Tonight, for a while, you are part of that curve, held gently in its glow. The fire has almost rocked you to sleep when a fingertip taps your arm. You turn and see the sling child, ash-smudged and wide awake, chin pointed toward the shadows beyond the huts. The question in their eyes is simple: are you coming or not? You glance at the nearby adults. A woman meets the child's gaze and gives the tiniest nod. The child brightens, then tugs gently at your wrist. Your legs creak as you stand, unused to spending evenings on bare earth instead of furniture, and you follow. In a few steps, the tight cluster of huts loosens, their firelight shrinking behind you. Trees lean closer, ferns brush your calves. The path is only a faint depression in the leaf litter, but the child moves along it like a stream finding its way downhill. The sound of the river swells until the trees open and you're on the bank again. The water is nearly black now, stitched with moving reflections of early stars. Cool air slides off the surface and wraps around you, rinsing away the smell of smoke. Several children crouch near a low mound of stones. You squat beside them and see that the stones are sorted. One small pile of thin, flat pieces, another of round pebbles, another of odd, knobbly chunks. Small hands feel, weigh, and move each stone without hesitation. The sling child gathers a fistful of the flattest and strolls to the water's edge. Their shoulders soften, wrist loose. The stone leaves their hand low and easy. 1, 2, 3, 4 quick skips tremble across the surface before it finally drops. The others murmur approval, a soft chorus that matches the river's gentle tone. A flat stone is pressed into your palm, then adjusted by a frown and a swap. You step forward, feel the cool breath of the river, and throw. Your stone bounces once in a very brave attempt, and then belly flops loudly. No one laughs. Another demonstration follows, slower this time, the motion clear, and the child gestures for you to try again. So you do. Some stones dive immediately, a few scrape out 2 or 3 skips. The group rewards each small success with quiet sounds of encouragement. Without ever naming it, they're teaching distance, angle, patience, and how water answers when you touch its skin. At a bend where the bank has been bitten away, darker earth gleams. One child digs both hands into it and comes up with a heavy lump. Clay. Soon everyone is scooping thick, cool handfuls from the exposed vein and plopping them in a shared heap. Someone gives you a piece. It is smooth and firm, yielding slowly as you squeeze. Around you, the children roll and pinch their chunks into shapes. A coil spiraled into a bowl, a blobby animal with hopeful ears, a flattened slab stamped with a whole handprint. You imitate them, producing something that might be a cup or might be modern art. No one minds. When a bowl splits or an animal collapses, its maker doesn't sulk. They simply crush it back into a ball, dip it in river water, and start again. Failure here isn't a verdict. It's just part of the material. The lesson is wordless but clear. Keep shaping until it holds. At a few of the sturdier pieces are lined up on a flat rock, a tiny gallery beside the water. They may dry by a hearth tomorrow or crumble back into mud. Either way, the knowledge has already moved into the fingers that made them. Then the slings appear. They're simple, braided cords, a small cradle of leather or woven fiber. The older children load round pebbles from another pile and step a little back from the water. Targets emerge across the stream, a pale stone, a hollow in a fallen trunk. You watch the rhythm. Stone placed, cords gathered, arm swinging, release. The sling whirs softly, the pebble snaps away and vanishes with a faint thud or splash. Every throw is angled away from huts and birds, habit turning power into responsibility. No one explains the rules, they just follow them. Eventually, one sling is offered to you. You take it, feeling the small seriousness of the stone in its cradle. You mimic the motion. Slow circle, faster circle, release. The pebble arches out, lands with an unremarkable splash that still earns you a friendly murmur. Clay dries in the lines of your hands, the pull of the sling lingers in your wrist. Looking at the river, the stones, the scattered little gallery of lopsided bowls, you realize this bank is the village school. Games here teach aim, restraint, patience, and how water answers when you touch its skin. Above, the sky has deepened into a bowl of bright stars. Behind you, through the trees, the hearths glow like low, steady constellations pinned to the ground. The children gather their favorite stones and a few precious clay creations and start back along the path. You fall into step with them, feet quiet on the earth, the river's murmur following all of you home. By the time you reach the huts again, your hands are streaked with dried clay, your arm remembers the soft pull of the sling, and the village has settled into that comfortable half-quiet that comes just before true sleep. Later, wrapped in the smell of smoke and warm earth, you drift off with the river's murmur in your ears. When you wake, light is already filtering gently through the leaves overhead. The fires are coals now, under small, patient new flames. The air is cool and clean, the smoke thinner, almost sweet. Someone passes by with a bundle of woven baskets over one shoulder and nods at you, as if to say, "Good, you're awake, we're going." You find yourself drawn into a small group gathering near the edge of the huts. There's the hunter with the quiet eyes, of course, slinging a leather pouch over his shoulder. Beside him stands a broad-shouldered woman with a necklace of tiny dried seeds, and an older man whose hair has gone almost the color of ash, though his back is still straight. Two younger people join, each carrying a basket that looks as if it has seen 1,000 trips and expects 1,000 more. No speeches, no pep talk, just a shared glance around the circle and then a collective, easy turn toward the forest. You go with them, your place in the line as natural now as your place by the fire last night. The path into the deeper green is narrower than the ones threading between the huts. Ferns lean in, brushing your legs with cool fronds. Above, the trees climb higher, their trunks streaked with pale lichen, their roots swelling and sinking like slow waves frozen mid-crest. The air is different here, wetter, quieter, full of layers of scent. The seed necklace woman takes the lead. Every few steps she pauses, head tilted. Sometimes she bends to examine a leaf or presses her fingers into the bark of a trunk. Sometimes she only closes her eyes briefly, as if listening for a note in the forest's background music that you can't quite hear yet. A patch of low plants spreads ahead, broad leaves forming a soft carpet over the soil. To you, it's just green. To her, it's a library. She kneels, touches one leaf, then another. You notice that some have a faint reddish tint along the edge. She plucks one of those, rubs it between her fingers, and then holds her hand under your nose. The smell is sharp, bright, like broken pine and pepper had a quiet meeting. With the other hand, she presses her fingertips to her temple, mimes a slow exhale, and then opens her palm as if letting something float away. Headache leaf, your brain translates. No brand name, no dosage, just leaf, scent, and years of trial and error not killing anyone. Nearby, another plant grows in a taller clump, its leaves narrow and glossy. The older man gestures you closer, snaps a leaf, and crushes it. The smell is deeper, resinous, with a faint sweetness under the sharpness. He pantomimes a cut on his forearm, dabs the invisible wound with invisible paste, and then flexes his arm easily. You nod, understanding. This one seals and soothes. Your modern first aid kit suddenly feels very talkative and overpackaged. As you walk on, the forest becomes a series of quiet lessons. A small furry plant that feels soft as a sleeping animal's ear is good for padding a shoe or lining a cradle. A thin vine with a bitter taste at the tip of its leaf is a warning. Don't eat. Don't touch too much. Keep children away. A cluster of tiny white flowers that open only where the light filters just so is gently tapped and then left alone with a respectful gesture, because not everything useful is yours to take whenever you feel like it. You start to notice the bird calls too. At first, they're just part of the forest's soundtrack. But when the seed necklace woman raises a hand and everyone pauses, you listen harder. A low, repetitive call sounds from somewhere ahead, a little too insistent, a little too flat. She shakes her head and makes the shape of claws with her hand. Somewhere a predator moves. Better to curve your path a little, keep your baskets intact and your arms unbitten. No one panics. No one whispers dramatic warnings. The group simply adjusts course. Your own life is full of notifications that scream about every minor change. This forest whispers, and they still hear it every time. Deeper in, the trees grow thicker, their bark rough and dark. The hunter taps one with the back of his knuckles, listens to the hollow tone, then reaches up to a place where the bark bulges. His knife, stone, smooth-handled, efficient, slides under a crust of dried resin. He pries gently, and a golden wedge peels away, soft and sticky in the center, hardened at the edges. The smell that blooms out is warm and honeyed with a faint, wild edge, like sunshine made solid. He passes the piece to you. It clings to your fingers, tacky and pliant. With patient movements, he demonstrates how it's softened by the warmth of his hands and shaped into a small lump. He mimes pressing it around the base of a spearhead, sealing cracks in the basket, rubbing a thin layer along a rough place on a tool. Glue, sealant, waterproofing, and probably deluxe bug repellent, all in one prehistoric subscription. The old man adds another layer, crumbling a pinch of dried leaf into a burning coal he's brought along in a little clay dish. When the resin warms and melts onto it, a rich, smoky sweetness rises. Everyone closes their eyes a moment. The hunter touches one of his bone charms. The woman rests her hand over her heart, and you realize sometimes they use this scent not to fix things, but to fix themselves. Calm in a smell. You have apps, they have trees. As the baskets slowly fill, bundles of leaves tied with fiber, lumps of resin wrapped in broad, waxy foliage, you notice how little they actually take. A patch of plants is never stripped bare. A tree is never gouged. Hands move carefully, selecting, leaving, touching trunks in thanks with unconscious familiarity. The forest here isn't a store, it's a relative. You don't raid your grandmother's kitchen. You visit, you take what she offers, you leave enough for tomorrow. Now and then you catch a shadow of worry crossing one of their faces. A plant that should be taller is stunted. A patch that should be lush is thin. The older man squints toward where, distant through the trees, the river must be turning and pushing at its banks. He murmurs something low, and the hunter answers with one quiet word you don't understand but feel: maybe, or again. They don't dwell on it, not yet. The problem is upstream and is still just a rumor in the leaves. For now, they keep walking under ferns and towering trunks, listening to bird calls and the faraway murmur of the river changing its tone by a fraction. Every leaf they touch, every scent they test, every little sound they interpret is part of an unwritten book they've been reading their whole lives, a book they've let you crack open just for today, as you wander with them through the deeper green.
You don't notice it all at once. Like most problems worth paying attention to, it starts as a feeling before it becomes a fact. The group has been walking for a while, baskets a little heavier, shoulders a little looser. The forest is still green, still layered with scents and birdsong, but beneath it all there's the faintest tug in the air, like someone has changed one note in a familiar song. At first you think it's just the smell of the resin coal the old man carries in his clay dish. The sweet, smoky perfume drifts around you in lazy strands, marking your small party as a moving bubble of warmth in the cooler shadows. But then the scent shifts. There's a darker edge under it now, something faintly sour and charred, as if someone far away has burned damp wood by accident and is hoping nobody noticed. You come to a place where the trees thin and the ground slopes down. The seed necklace woman raises her hand and everyone pauses. Through the trunks, you catch a glimpse of pale movement, the river. You'd think you'd be used to it by now, the constant background murmur, the steady, reassuring presence. But here it sounds different. Less like a flowing conversation, more like someone with a mild throat problem trying not to cough. You step out onto a low bank, expecting the familiar dark ribbon and silver glints. The river is still there, but its surface looks wrong. Where it curves around a gentle bend, foam gathers in thick patches, yellowish and restless. It piles up along the inside edge, creeping higher than it should, swirling back on itself in uncertain circles. Above that bend, a faint haze rises where there should only be clear air. It's not the white mist of morning breath or the soft ghosts of evaporation. This is darker, tinged with brown and gray, hanging just a little heavier than it ought to. It doesn't billow like a forest fire, and there's no roar, no crackling catastrophe. It just seeps upward, thread by thread, like smoke from a shy, embarrassed problem. The others don't rush forward, but their bodies tighten almost imperceptibly. The hunter's hand drifts to his belt, not for a weapon, but for the bone charm you've seen him touch when choosing a path. The old man shifts his basket onto the ground, freeing his arms. The seed necklace woman narrows her eyes at the foam, like she's reading a paragraph that definitely was not in last season's story. They move closer in a loose semicircle. You follow, and the smell grows clearer. River water, yes, but muddier, carrying a faint tang of rotten leaves that haven't had enough time or space to decompose quietly. Mixed into it is that darker, burnt scent, the ghost of something scraped and tumbled and broken upstream. The hunter crouches at the edge and dips his hand into the flow, scooping up water and foam together. He lets it run out between his fingers, watching how the bubbles cling and pop. Then he scoops again, this time just clear water from nearer the middle of the current. He sloshes both handfuls onto the muddy bank side by side. One soaks in quickly, disappearing into the earth. The other sits on top for a long moment, sulking before slowly sinking away. He grunts softly. You don't know the word, but you understand the meaning. Too much, too heavy, wrong. The older man studies the bend. You follow his gaze upstream. You can't see far, the curve hides whatever is happening, but you notice how the current seems to hesitate, piling up a little before pushing past, as if something just around that corner is narrowing its path, squeezing it, making it work harder to be itself. In your own life, this is the point where you'd expect a push notification, alert, flood risk in your area. Click here for more information and 12 ads. Here, nobody's phone buzzes. Instead, 5 pairs of eyes and 5 sets of lungs do all the monitoring. The seed necklace woman squats and presses her ear close to the water, listening to the sound it makes as it passes. It's not louder exactly, just rougher, with tiny catches and gurgles where it used to slide smooth. She straightens and looks at the others, then taps her chest twice and draws a line with her hand up the river, into the unseen. It's not your language, but the translation lands anyway. Something upstream, not right. No one starts panicking or packing emergency go bags, but the easy, drifting mood of gathering leaves and resin has gone. They begin to move in a slow, deliberate rhythm, the way you might tidy a table before a difficult conversation. The old man sets his clay dish on a flat stone and sprinkles a pinch of dried herb onto the glowing coal. When he adds a thin shard of resin, the smoke that rises is warm and golden, sweeter than the sour tang from the bend. He wafts it toward the river with his hand, not like a spell to fix everything, but like an apology, or maybe a promise. You've seen people whisper at altars, tap icons on screens, update status messages to say they're sending thoughts and prayers. This is quieter, no hashtags, just smoke meeting water, one element acknowledging another. The hunter plucks a leaf from a nearby shrub and lets it drop onto the surface, eyes following its path. It twirls, catches in the foam, stalls, then is finally pulled onward with an effort. He nods once, as if a suspicion has just become a certainty. He touches the bone charm at his belt,
then the small pebble you recognize from last night's bread circle. The message is clear enough. We will talk. We will decide. The group doesn't head upstream right away. That will be tomorrow's task, with more hands and more daylight. For now, they stand together, saying nothing, memorizing the color of the froth and the thickness of the smoke and the way the river sounds when it doesn't quite recognize its own bed. They're saving the details in their bones the way you might bookmark a news article, only this archive lives in muscle and habit, not in closed tabs you'll never open again. When they finally turn back toward the village, the path feels different under your feet. You still walk between ferns and great old trunks, still smell moss and leaf and distant hearth smoke, but the river's voice stays with you in a new way. It's like hearing a friend cough once in the middle of a conversation. Just once, nothing dramatic, and knowing you'll be listening a little closer next time. As the trees thin and the first huts appear ahead, you look back over your shoulder. The bend is hidden now. The strange foam and the darker haze have slid out of sight behind curtains of leaves. But they haven't left your mind. They travel with you, tucked just behind your more immediate thoughts of bread and fire and warm stone, an omen drifting there like a small, persistent patch of froth that refuses to sink.
You don't walk back into panic when you reach the village again. These people don't sprint toward trouble. They simply lean their attention toward it, slowly and steadily. Wood is still stacked, pots still bubble, children still streak between huts in smoky zigzags. But glances now drift more often toward the trees, hiding that strange foamy bend in the river. Dusk gathers over the leaf roofs, turning the sky to deep blue, while hearths flare one by one, opening warm circles of orange on the forest floor. Thin strands of smoke climb into the cooling air and spread out like quiet thoughts, and your feet follow yesterday's path without effort, carrying you back to the central fire as if you already belong here. The hunter sits cross-legged, with his hands loose on his knees. The seed necklace woman turns a dried pod between her fingers, and the clay-fingered elder smooths a fresh ring of earth around a cracked pot's lip. Others arrive in ones and twos, folding their legs and settling around the flames with the practiced ease of people who have shared many evenings and many small worries together. Near the fire, two low wooden frames with hide stretched across them wait like sleeping animals, their surfaces darkened by years of smoke and touch. A young woman settles behind one drum, a lanky boy behind the other, and without any announcement, she lays her palm on the hide, lifts it, and lets it fall. The sound is soft but deep, a gentle knock from under the earth that the boy answers with a second measured thump landing squarely in your chest. Within a few breaths, they weave a slow, steady pattern that moves at river pace, and your breathing drifts into rhythm with it the way footsteps fall into step beside a friend. Around the circle, shoulders drop, backs curve into easier shapes, and low humming begins to thread itself around the drum beats, simple notes that ride the rhythm like leaves on water. The hunter's fingers tap a faint counterbeat on his knees, while firelight flickers across thoughtful faces, and you realize this borrowed heartbeat is quietly turning down the volume on your own noisy century. As the pattern settles, the elders' voices slip into the spaces between beats. They don't stand or shout,
They simply lean closer to the flames and let words move out in slow, even lines. You can't follow the language, but you catch the story anyway in the shapes of their hands. Foam at the bend, a slower pull to the current, a sour smell under the usual clean, cold scent of river water. Fingers trace invisible curves showing the bow of the river, sketch the angle of a fallen trunk lying across it, and stack flat palms to suggest stones sliding down and squeezing the flow where it wants to run free. The seed necklace woman adds leaves and roots to this unseen map, miming patches that have grown smaller and weaker. And her quick tilt of the chin toward the hidden bend says clearly enough that if the river holds its breath, everything listening to it will feel the strain. The clay-streaked elder answers with wide, slow arcs of his hands, drawing memory into the smoke. Years when water climbed too high into sleeping places. Years when it sank low and left fish stranded in hot, shrinking pockets. He taps his chest, then gestures toward the younger adults gathered close, pressing those old stories into them like smooth stones, while the drums keep breathing underneath, sometimes adding 2 quick strokes and a long pause where the river's roughened murmur drifts in to join the song. Finally, the hunter speaks, and bodies lean an inch in his direction. His sentences are short, but his hands sketch roots gripping banks, a heavy log jammed against stone, and shoulders straining to test and slowly lever it loose, finishing with a calm tap to his chest that clearly means hard work, yes, but possible. A low ripple of agreement circles the fire as tomorrow's plan quietly takes shape. Some will walk upstream at first light to see the trouble with their own eyes. No votes, no arguments, just names murmured and accepted. The seed necklace woman nodding, the old man tapping a younger man's shoulder instead of his own, and the hunter's glance brushing yours, including you without pressure. While the drums slow, children are gathered and carried to the huts, and the final gentle beat fades into a silence that feels full, not empty, leaving the worry about foam and fallen stones wrapped inside a larger rhythm of shared breath and steady trust that will carry you a little closer to sleep. Dawn seeps slowly through the canopy, turning the leaf roofs a soft gold and drawing thin curls of smoke from the first waking hearths. You wake to the quiet click of kindling, the hollow clink of a pot on stones, and the river sounding sharper in the cool air, as if it has more on its mind. No one shouts. People simply stand up, stretch, and get on with being alive. The upstream party gathers with the same calm. The hunter checks the edge of his stone knife and settles his pouch on his hip. The seed necklace woman slips a small bundle of herbs into her belt. 2 younger villagers coil ropes over their shoulders, the cords dark and shiny from long use. Someone presses a walking stick into your hand, smooth, balanced, obviously borrowed from generations of please don't fall in moments. The hunter gives you a brief nod toward the riverbank, and that's all the orientation you're going to get. You leave the village behind, huts shrinking into dim shapes among the trees, until only the faintest threads of smoke mark where home is. The upstream path is really just habit pressed into earth, a flattened strip here, a scuffed root there. Sometimes the bank rises in a tangled wall of roots and stones. Sometimes it drops to narrow ledges where the water comes up to tap politely at your boots. Moss covers most of it, bright and soft, and absolutely delighted to betray your balance. Your walking stick immediately earns its place in the group. It tests leaf piles that might hide holes, argues with slick stones before your feet commit, and gives you a third point of balance when the ground angles away without warning. The hunter moves ahead with the relaxed precision of someone who could do this half asleep, stepping from root to rock like he's following a rhythm only he can hear. You, meanwhile, rehearse several interesting ways to nearly fall over. One rope carrier catches your elbow once, grins, and looks away again, as if almost becoming river furniture is an ordinary part of growing up. As you push upstream, the river's voice slowly changes. The easy murmur you heard near the village thickens, picking up a rough, uneven edge. Foam begins to cling along the banks in thin, stained ribbons, hugging reeds and stones instead of slipping past. The seed necklace woman pauses now and then to crouch at the water's edge, pinching a little froth between her fingers, sniffing, watching how quickly it breaks apart. She doesn't speak, but the faint deepening crease between her brows works just fine as a forecast. The forest leans closer around you. Branches reach out above the water until they almost mesh, turning the river into a dim green corridor. Ferns crowd the path, brushing your legs with cool, damp fronds. Drops slide down your skin in slow, wandering lines. In one stretch, the bank has collapsed entirely, leaving a steep slice of raw earth and hanging roots. The hunter goes first, planting his feet carefully and testing each hold. Then he looks up, raises his hand. You skid down more than climb, and his grip on your forearm keeps you from completing the trip face first into the current. Ahead, the sound grows louder, but not bright and laughing like a waterfall. It's chopped and restless, the way a song sounds when someone keeps coughing through the chorus. Foam thickens along one side of the channel, piling into lumpy drifts around branches jammed in the shallows. The ropes on your companion's shoulders suddenly look much less decorative. You round a bend, and the trouble finally shows itself. The river narrows between two rocky shoulders where an old low cliff has lost an old argument with gravity. A slab of stone has slumped down into the channel, forming a jagged barrier that squeezes the water into a narrower, harsher lane. Trunks and branches from past storms are jammed against it, woven together by force into a crooked, accidental wall that catches every new piece of debris. Water backs up behind the jam, swirling in short, frustrated loops before punching through a few narrow gaps. In those choke points, the current beats itself into thick, sour-smelling foam that clings to anything it can grab. A faint brownish haze hangs above the mess, part mist, part dust, blurring what should be clean morning light. The hunter steps onto a flat stone and studies the blockage the way he studied tracks in mud, patient, silent, thorough. You can sense him measuring without numbers, this trunk wedged deepest, that rock loose enough to move, this gap safe to stand in, that one waiting to snatch a careless leg. You watch the hunter's gaze travel slowly along the jam, the way it did along the prints in the mud, except this time the story is a little louder and a lot wetter. He doesn't sigh or roll his eyes at the river's poor life choices. He just turns his head and meets the other's eyes one by one. A few short words pass between them, low and practical, and then everyone starts moving without waiting for anybody to nominate themselves meeting leader. The rope carriers shrug their coils loose. The cords spill down in dark loops, stiff where resin has been rubbed in over many seasons to keep them strong and less likely to sulk when wet. One of the younger villagers ties a loop in the end of his rope with quick, practiced motions, fingers moving like they're repeating a song they've known since they could walk. The hunter steps to the edge of the water and selects a long, straight branch from the tangled mess nearest the bank. Less of a log, more of a candidate. He tests the branch by leaning his weight into it, feeling how it gives, how it fights back. Then he nods to one of the others, who wades in up to his knees where the current is still manageable. The water clutches at his legs, annoyed, but he plants his feet wide on the gravelly bottom and braces. Together they heave the branch sideways, easing it out from the tight hug of other logs until they can slide it closer to shore. You half expect somebody to shout instructions, to call out steps like an exercise video. Instead, the rhythm is all glances and small gestures. A lifted chin toward a stone, a tapped fingertip indicating where to stand, a brief pat on a shoulder that means hold here. The seed necklace woman stays just out of the main pull of the current, but her eyes miss nothing. When she calls out, it's brief, just a single word that makes someone shift a foot or adjust their grip before the river can make a fool of them. Once the test branch is beached and set aside, the real work begins. The hunter draws his stone knife, its edge pale and bright against the damp bark. He crouches near a thick tangle of smaller branches matted together by past floods, and starts slicing away the thin, snaggy bits that only add chaos without adding strength. Each cut is a small, precise decision. This twig is nothing. That one holds the whole messy braid in place. The tool makes no dramatic sound, just the faint scrape and crunch of plant fibers parting one after another. You're handed a task that even your modern, mostly keyboard-trained hands can manage, carrying cut brush up the bank, piling it where it won't wash straight back in with the next strong push of water. The pile grows into a shaggy hill of future firewood and camp seating. It's not heroic, but it matters. Every armful lightens the mass pressing against the stone. The ropes come into play next. One loop is tossed, a little too casually, your heart notes, over the protruding end of a heavier log that's jammed diagonally across the worst of the blockage. The first throw misses, of course, because the river is not here to make things easy. The rope splashes, is hauled back, wrung quickly between strong hands to shake off extra water, then sent swinging again in a smoother, more thoughtful arc. It lands this time, dropping neatly over the end of the log and sliding down to catch against a knot and a convenient bump of bark. 3 people take the rope, spreading out along the bank until the line is taut. The hunter gives a small grunt, the kind that stands in for ready and here we go all at once. On his signal, they lean back in unison, heels digging into mud, shoulders braced. The rope creaks. The log holds its breath. Water rushes harder through the narrow gaps, furious at being asked to change anything. For a moment, nothing moves. Then the log shudders, shifts a finger's width, then 2.
Foam surges as trapped pockets of water burst free, swirling downstream in a sulky rush. They rest before trying again. No one is interested in reenacting unexpected swimming lessons starring you. The seed necklace woman wades in closer to the jam, keeping to the shallower, calmer edge, and pushes against the same log with both hands. The hunter kisses his bone charm with his fingertips and nods once. On the next pole, with her weight added to the river's grudging help, the log finally tears loose from the stones and rolls with a sodden sigh into freer, deeper water before slamming into the bank below. The rope handlers stagger a little, then laugh out through their teeth, the sound quickly swallowed by the trees. As one obstacle yields, the rest of the jam looks less like a permanent wall and more like a sulking stack of things that could, under the right persuasion, remember how to move. Smaller branches are cut, passed, and flung aside with murmured warnings. Rocks worked loose by the shifted log are pried out with levered branches, rolled carefully to safer places on the bank. Here, your walking stick graduates to very junior lever, helping pry a stubborn stone just enough that someone else can wedge a second branch underneath. The work is slow and undramatic, which is exactly what you want when the consequences of a mistake involve fast water and inconvenient drowning. Nobody tries to be the hero of the jam. When someone's arms shake with effort, another set of hands simply closes over the rope, and the tired person steps aside without argument or apology. The river pummels the gap whenever it opens, testing every change, but each time the villagers adjust their stance, their angle, their grip, learning in real time how the current wants to go, and helping it just enough to remember its old route. At one point, a precarious tangle gives way all at once, and a muddy wave slaps against the bank, soaking your legs to the knee with shockingly cold water. You gasp, they chuckle softly, the tension sideways instead of upward. The seed necklace woman flicks foam from your sleeve, her mouth quirking into a half smile that translates as, "The river says hello. You're still here. Good." Little by little, the wall dissolves into pieces the river can carry again, or the village can use. A thick limb becomes a future beam. A flattish rock is rolled up and mentally bookmarked as a good grinding surface. Even here, in the middle of a messy problem, they're thinking ahead to bread and herbs and hands at work on quieter days. Eventually, there's no single defiant obstacle left, just a cluttered, more natural channel. Enough has been shifted that the river can thread itself through without foaming and protest. The water that once backed up in sullen, swirling pools now slides past with a smoother, quicker sigh. Foam still gathers in corners, but it's thinner, less angry, already being pulled downstream to dissolve into nothing much. The hunter crouches at the edge again and cups his hands into the current, lifting another double handful and letting it spill onto the bank. This time, the water sinks into the earth more willingly, without that stubborn pause. He listens, head tilted, to the new sound. Less choking, more conversation. The others stand on stones and roots, wet to varying degrees, breathing a little harder than usual, but not making a big deal of it. No fist pumps or announcements of "crisis averted" or "you're welcome, river." Just a shared quiet satisfaction that things now look and sound closer to how they should. When they finally coil the ropes back onto their shoulders and sling baskets into place, the sun has slipped past its highest point and begun its long, slow lean toward the far side of the sky.
Light slants through the trees in gentle bands, catching droplets on leaves and turning them into tiny, unbothered stars. Behind you, the river keeps talking, its roughness smoothed by all those hands in careful choices, ready to carry the village's worries away when you all start the long walk home.
You stand there a moment longer, watching the river try out its new voice. It's not perfect. There are still branches tucked along the banks, still stones jutting where they want, but that's how rivers are. They're never finished, just constantly negotiating with gravity. The hunter straightens, rolls one shoulder, and gives the water a small nod, like two coworkers who've just survived a difficult shift together. Then he glances back at the group and taps two fingers toward the village. Time to go. You fall in behind them as they begin the walk home, bodies turning downstream with the current. Somehow the air already feels lighter. The sour tang that clung around the jam has thinned to a faint memory. The river's murmur is smoother now, like someone has cleared a stubborn bit of phlegm from its throat. You didn't realize how much you'd been tensing against that rough, choked sound until it's gone. Your shoulders drop half an inch without asking permission. The sun has started its slow slide toward the far side of the sky, but under the tall trees, day stretches itself out a little longer. Stripes of pale light angle through the branches, touching moss and damp bark, turning droplets on leaves into brief sparks. The forest feels like it's exhaling with you. Nothing dramatic, just a shared, quiet, that's better. The path, which felt stubborn and awkward on the way up, is friendlier on the way down. It still throws in the occasional root to keep you honest, but your feet remember where not to put themselves this time. The walking stick taps ahead, checking loose stones, helping you step down slick clay slopes without auditioning for a prehistoric slapstick routine. When you slide anyway, one of the rope carriers is there with a steadying hand and a half smile that says, "The river nearly keeps all of us sometimes." At one bend, you pause as the seed necklace woman crouches near a patch of plants you passed earlier without noticing. The leaves here are broader, their undersides flecked with tiny silver dots that catch the slanting light. She plucks a few, tasting the edge of one leaf with careful lips before tucking the rest into her basket. Journey home, for her, is never just walking. It's collecting little pieces of future comfort. Somewhere tonight, those leaves will end up in a steaming pot, and someone with a sore throat will feel seen, without needing to make a big speech about it. As you walk, the hunter falls into step beside you. His bone charms clink softly with each stride, a quieter, more grounded version of all the alerts your phone would be throwing at you right now. He doesn't say anything, but every so often his gaze flicks to the water, checking the way it curls around boulders and slips over shallows. A few times he nods, satisfied. Once he frowns slightly, marking a snag that will need attention later. Even relief here doesn't mean ignoring the river. It just means you've earned the right to listen more gently again. Gradually, the light softens into something thinner and cooler. Mist begins to gather along the water's surface, first in little folds like someone's breath on a cold window, then in longer, trailing veils that slide along the current. The river carries the fog as calmly as it carried branches earlier, only now there's no protest, just an easy, low-gliding silence. The path narrows where the forest leans in. Ferns brush your knees, low branches stroke your shoulders.
And then you notice the first flicker. At the edge of your vision, a tiny light winks on, holds for a heartbeat, and disappears. Then another, a little farther ahead, and another over the water. Fireflies. They rise from the damp grass and mossy logs like someone poking holes in the dusk. Pale green and soft yellow, they blink in an unplanned, perfect randomness that makes your brain give up trying to spot a pattern and just enjoy. Some drift close, tiny lanterns bobbing lazily past your knees. Others hover over the river, their reflections doubling them into little loops of light, one above, one below, both in motion. The mist, the fireflies, the low talk of the river, they all braid together into something that feels very deliberately designed to make nervous systems stand down. You can almost hear your overworked brain muttering, "Okay, fine, I'll stop checking imaginary emails for 5 minutes." The group slows a little, not from exhaustion, but as if they too respect this soft corridor of fog and light. Conversations fall quiet. The only sounds now are the hush of water, the gentle squelch of feet in damp earth, and the faint tinkle of bone and stone charms. The seed necklace woman lifts her hand, palm upward, and a firefly settles briefly on her skin before lifting off again. She smiles, small, private, satisfied, and then keeps walking. You notice how their tiredness shows up almost politely. No one slumps dramatically or complains. Instead, steps shorten a fraction, shoulders sag a touch, breaths come out in longer, deeper waves. When they pause, it's to listen, to the current, to the bird that still calls once from somewhere high in the canopy, to the way the fog curls and uncurls around their ankles. Even their rest is a kind of conversation with the place they live in. By the time the first faint orange glows appear ahead, the sky above the treetops has slipped from deep blue to almost black. Huts emerge as darker shapes against that darkness, their little fires painting moving bands of color on the trunks around them. The river beside the village sounds different too, still itself, but lighter now, carrying a soft, quick ripple that wasn't there yesterday. You listen, and it feels almost like laughter. Not loud, not wild, just the comfortable amusement of water that has room again. On a low bank near the nearest huts, children crouch with baskets and sticks. You see one of yesterday's clay players dash to the edge, dip a toe in, and squeal at the cold before grinning. The adults they run to are damp up to mid-thigh, speckled with mud and bits of bark. There is no dramatic story time about heroics, just hands held out, muscles squeezed, quiet questions asked and answered. A small knot of worry you didn't realize you were carrying loosens in your chest along with theirs. As you step up from the river path and into the familiar web of huts and smoke, you glance back over your shoulder. The water slides past in the dimness, mist rising softly from its surface, fireflies floating above it like sleepy stars that got distracted on their way to the sky. The current's new, happier murmur trails after you, slipping between trunks and around walls, as if reminding you that problems here don't vanish. They're met, worked with, then allowed to flow on. You follow the others toward the center of the village, mud drying on your legs, shoulders pleasantly tired, breath moving in long, easy lines. Behind you, the river keeps talking to the stones, and tonight, finally, it sounds like it's telling a gentler story. By the time you drift back toward the central hearth, The village has changed clothes again. Work has slipped off its shoulders, worry has loosened its grip. The sky above the leaf roofs is a deep, velvety blue, with only the brightest stars peeking through the canopy. The main fire is smaller than the night before, not a leaping blaze, but a low, glowing bed of embers with a few gentle flames licking at the edges, like a heart resting between beats. You sink down onto the packed earth with the others, your legs quietly relieved to be horizontal. Heat from the coals brushes your cheeks. Cool air from the river strokes the back of your neck. Someone hands you a thin slice of bread, warmed on a stone, but not crisped, soft as a pillow in your fingers. Another offers a small clay bowl with a ladleful of something simple, roots and greens and flakes of fish. The day's efforts turned into an uncomplicated, "You did good, now eat." You don't realize how hungry you've become until that first mouthful goes down and your whole body sighs. Around the circle, faces glow softly in the firelight. The hunter sits with his arms looped loosely around his knees, bone charms resting quiet against his chest. The seed necklace woman turns a seed pod over and over between her fingers, no longer judging the river's foam, just enjoying the familiar weight. Children cluster close, some leaning against parents, some already sliding sideways as sleep sneaks up on them. A few have smudges of dried clay still on their hands from riverbank experiments. One little sling is coiled beside a child's bare foot like a tired snake. The drums appear again, those hide-stretched frames, edges darkened by smoke and years of hands. But tonight they don't lead with firm walking beats. The woman at one drum taps it with the side of her thumb, barely touching, producing a soft, round sound like a stone dropped gently into very deep water. The boy answers with an even quieter echo. No rhythm to march to now, just a slow, irregular heartbeat that leaves plenty of room for words. The elder with the ash-colored hair leans forward, elbows on his knees, palms open to the warmth. When he begins to speak, his voice is low and rough-edged, like wood worn smooth where countless hands have touched it. You can't follow the exact words, but you recognize the shape. This is not about today or yesterday. This is about back when, the time before any particular person in this circle was carrying baskets or tying ropes. He lifts one hand and sweeps it out to trace the line of the forest around you. The story, whatever its words, says that long ago these trees walked. Not fast, not loudly, but they moved, following the path of the sun, crowding closer to the river when it ran kindly, and pulling away when it raged. He mimes roots lifting like toes, trunks stepping carefully over stones. The children watch, wide-eyed. The hunter's mouth curves a little. He's heard this before, but repetition is part of the comfort. The elder taps his own stone at the edge of the hearth, then mimics striking one stone against another, flint kissing flint. The younger villagers smile. They know this version too. People learning to make their own lightning in miniature, trading fear for skill. You picture the hunter's careful blows on his knife-edged stone, the resin the group harvested and warmed, the smoke and scent wrapped around you when they fed herbs to the coal. Suddenly, tonight's small and well-behaved fire feels like the grandchild of something once enormous and terrifying. A second elder takes over, her voice higher. weaving her words around his like two threads spun together. Her hands shaped the river, arms sweeping long and low, wrists turning to show the bend near the village. She cups her palms and lets them run apart, imitating water slipping between stones. The children murmur a word in unison at one name she repeats, probably the river spirit itself, more personality than deity, more neighbor than distant god. In her story, the river is a restless child at first, rushing where it shouldn't, sulking in places it should leave, throwing itself at rocks in dramatic huffs. The forest and the stones are patient, guiding, narrowing, widening, nudging the water into a path that will keep it from drowning everything it loves. At one point she claps both hands together with a splash-like sound, and foam is mentioned. Several pairs of eyes flick briefly to you and the upstream crew, then back to the fire. They all heard about today's little drama, even if nobody turned it into a performance. She mimes the river getting sick, hand to her throat, a fake cough, when too many rocks tumble at once, or too many branches jam in a single bend. The cure in her telling is never to beat the water into obedience. It's always to go, as you did, with ropes and hands and patience, to lean together against what doesn't belong and help the water remember the way it wanted to go in the first place. It's essentially the same story you lived this afternoon, just stretched back to always and wrapped in metaphors. Somehow that makes your own wet boots feel a little legendary. Somewhere in there she adds a new piece. Her hand sweeps out to include you, the stranger who walked out of the forest, skipped stones with the children, laughed at your own clumsy sling throw, and helped haul brush from the jam. She doesn't name you. She just talks about the one who came with the river's worry, the extra pair of eyes that noticed the strange froth, the extra pair of hands that carried branches. The children follow her gesture and look at you, then back to the fire, accepting the edit with the seriousness kids reserve for good stories. Just like that, you are folded into their river myth, a small new loop added to a very old pattern. The drums have gone almost entirely quiet now. Once in a while the woman taps hers with the pads of her fingers, not to keep time, but to underline a moment, the first fire, the stubborn river, the shared effort. The flames have sunk lower, leaving more of the fire's work to the red-orange glow beneath. Shadows creep up the trunks around you, turning the forest beyond the circle into a soft, listening wall. Children drift off one by one, heads tipping onto shoulders, hands still faintly dusty with clay and crushed leaves. Adults talk less and breathe more. Somewhere behind you a log shifts, sending up a brief spray of sparks that spin up and vanish into the dark like very small, very ambitious fireflies trying out a new career. The seed necklace woman yawns behind the back of her hand. The hunter's eyes half close, catching the firelight but not fighting it. You feel your own mind loosening its grip on straight lines. Today's events, the herb gathering, the ominous foam, the ropes and the jam, the walk home through fireflies and fog, start to blur gently into the elder stories of walking trees and stolen lightning and a river spirit that occasionally gets a sore throat. Fact and myth slide over each other like clear water over stones, and for once you don't feel the need to decide which is which. You just sit, warm on the front, cool on the back, listening to the dying fire breathe and the river beyond the huts murmur softly to itself, aware that you are now part of this place's story, just as it has become part of yours.
At some point, you realize the words around the fire have thinned into pauses. The last story trails off, not with a grand ending, but with a small shrug and a soft chuckle from the elder, as if to say, "You know the rest by now." The flames have sunk into a low, glowing nest, red and orange deep in the coals. Only a few slivers of wood still burn with visible flame, their edges crumbling in slow motion. Bodies stir. One by one, people push themselves gently to their feet, moving the way you move when you've already half fallen asleep on a couch and someone mentions bed. A child is gathered up, head flopping briefly over a shoulder before nestling into the warm hollow of a neck. Another is nudged from where they've surrendered, curled on the ground like a little animal. They stumble toward a nearby hut, still clutching a seed pod like it's an important artifact. The hunter rises more slowly, his charms chiming a soft, familiar pattern as he straightens. He catches your eye and gives the smallest tilt of his head, half farewell, half question. Are you coming to sleep, or do you need one more loop of the village in your bones? You glance toward the dark smear of the river between the trunks, and he seems to understand without words. His hand brushes his chest, a quiet good night, and then he turns toward his own doorway. Ducking under the low lintel, his silhouette disappears into warm shadow. You stand, too, legs a little wobbly but grateful. The air outside the circle of the fire is cooler, wrapping around your arms and neck like river breath. Smoke thins as you step away from the hearth, becoming only a faint sweet trace alongside the sense of damp leaves and worn earth. Huts hunch into themselves, their doorways dark now that most of the little hearths inside have been banked. The few that still glow send soft orange suggestions of movement onto the ground, an arm hanging a bundle, a hand smoothing a sleeping mat, a quiet shape leaning to kiss a small forehead. You walk slowly, not because the ground demands it, but because your mind has shifted to last lap pace. Your feet remember the layout now. Here is the drying rack where fish hung in glistening rows. It's mostly empty night, just a few strips swaying like sleepy flags as the river's moisture slides through. Here is the cluster of baskets resting against a hut wall, their woven sides dark with the day's handling. On one of them, a smear of clay remains, the ghost of a child's handprint from earlier. You touch it gently with your fingertips, remembering the riverbank gallery of lopsided bowls and brave little animal shapes. Past the huts, the ground slopes down toward the water. The sky between the tree crowns shows more stars here, where the canopy has thinned from years of wind and river breath. They're not the same pattern you see from your own bed, not exactly, but they still arrange themselves into familiar stubbornness, pinpricks of light insisting that distance doesn't matter to their shine. A few fireflies still drift among the trunks, late to bed or simply not ready to give up their tiny lantern work yet. The river is a darker ribbon now, almost black, except where it catches starlight and turns it into shaky silver. You step close enough that your toes can feel the cool rising off it. The rocks you scrambled over earlier are now mostly suggestions, smoothed out by shadow. But the sound is clear, even clearer at this hour. Water folding over water, pebbles shifting under invisible toes, a constant gentle stitching noise as the current sows this day to the next. You listen. The roughness that worried you is gone. The river doesn't choke or stumble. It slides, chats, occasionally chuckles where it finds a new eddy or an old favorite stone. If you concentrate, you can almost pick out different voices, a low murmur from the deeper middle, a lighter hiss along the shallows, a faint chuckle where it curls around the roots of a leaning tree. The bend where the foam gathered is upstream, out of sight, but you know it's flowing clean again, carrying whatever's left of that froth far away from this particular village's sleep. You find a rock and ease yourself down onto it. It's still faintly warm from the day, but not hot, more like a well-used pillow that remembers your shape even though you've only sat here once. Your knees draw up of their own accord, your arms loop around them without needing instructions. You sit like that for a while. No screen, no clock, no hurry, just you, the dark, and the slow, chatty music of moving water. Your mind wanders back over the day, not in sharp, worried flashes, but in long, soft loops. The resin glowing on the coal, sending up sweet, golden smoke that smoothed the sharpness out of the air. The way the seed necklace woman's fingers knew leaves the way you know your favorite app's interface. The steady, patient pull of rope in your hands as the jam loosened and the river remembered its own path. Children's laughter skipping across the surface of the water along with their stones. Bread pressed into your hands, warm and smoky and uncomplicatedly kind. You realize that in all these hours, no one asked you where you came from. No one demanded you explain how you fell into their life for a day and will vanish from it again just as quickly. They simply folded you into whatever the current of the moment required. One more pair of hands to carry brush. One more pair of feet to tread the path. One more set of ears to hear the stories. You've lived so long in a world that insists on explaining and labeling everything that this quiet acceptance feels strange and deeply, deeply restful. Eventually, even in this place, sleep insists. Your eyes grow heavier each time the river's murmur slides through them. Thoughts linger for a breath or two, then drift away before they can turn into full sentences. Above, a branch creaks softly. A leaf lets go and spirals down to land near your foot with a sound so small you wouldn't have heard it a day ago. Now it feels like part of the lullaby. You stand, slowly, feeling the stiffness in your legs and the pleasant weight of tired muscles that have actually done something today besides hover over a keyboard. At the water's edge, you crouch, dip your fingers into the cool current, and let the river slide over your skin. It feels like a handshake, or maybe a goodbye hug from an old friend you've only just met. You whisper something. You're not sure what exactly. Thank you, maybe. Or see you in dreams. And the water folds your words into its endless conversation without a ripple of surprise. Turning back toward the village, you climb the small slope one last time. The huts are mostly dark now, their shapes barely outlined against the deeper forest. Only the faintest cherry glow remains at the heart of the central fire, like a single coal in a night of stars. Smoke has thinned to almost nothing, just a hint of it. Lingers, spicy and gentle, tucked into your hair and clothes like a souvenir the forest decided you should keep. You pass the doorway where children's clay bowls will dry tomorrow. You pass the rack where new fish will hang in the morning, silver and silent. You pass the spot where the hunter will stand again, reading prints in the mud as easily as you read notifications, only this time you hear the river properly in the background of that picture. And then you step into your own invisible doorway, the one that opens not into a fern-roofed hut, but into your bed, your pillow, your room with its humming fan and sliver of city light under the curtains.
The village doesn't vanish, it simply fades into the dark behind your closed eyelids. The forest breathes. The river goes on talking to the stones. Smoke unwinds itself into the night. And you, at last, let your thoughts loosen and drift, carried gently along until they stop needing words at all. The river will be there in the morning, whether you wake beside it or somewhere far away. For now, it just keeps murmuring, steady and calm, letting you fall asleep to the sound of water remembering its way home. You can follow it there if you like. All you have to do is rest. The air around you now is much quieter than the forest, but in a way it's doing the same thing, holding you, giving you just enough sound to keep the dark from feeling empty, but not enough to keep your mind busy. You can picture the huts as soft shapes, the hearth as a single ember, the hunter's charms lying still against his chest, the children breathing steadily under leaf roofs, and the river slipping past, patient as ever, carrying away the day. In your own bed, your body sinks just a little deeper into whatever it's resting on. Your shoulders loosen. Your jaw unlocks. The muscles at the back of your eyes soften. And your breath starts to match that slow, endless rhythm of water and sleep. In and out. In and out. You don't need to fix anything now. The jam is cleared, the villagers are safe, the fire is banked, not gone. The forest has accepted one more night of standing guard without complaint. All the problems big enough to worry about here have been met with ropes and patient hands. The rest can wait for other mornings, other stories. If any scraps of your day still cling to you, stray thoughts about messages, tasks, decisions, you can imagine them as those little pieces of foam on the river, no longer thick and soured, just small, harmless patches that drift gently away as the current carries them downstream. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to hold them. The water knows where to take them. Your only job now is to stand on the bank in your mind and watch them go. You are safe. You are warm enough. You are allowed to be tired. In this soft place between waking and sleep, you're not a stranger dropped into someone else's century. You are simply another traveler resting beside the same long river that has watched countless nights rise and fall. The forest doesn't ask who you are. The huts don't demand your name. The river doesn't quiz you on where you've been. It just moves and breathes and lets you rest beside it. So let your eyes close fully if they haven't already. Let your breath settle into that slow, comfortable rhythm that feels like being rocked in a very quiet boat on very gentle water. Let your thoughts stumble a little, lose their edges, turn from sentences into single words, then into sounds, then into nothing you have to follow. Some part of you might still be standing on that cool riverbank, listening to water humming to the stones while a thin line of smoke rises into a sky full of patient stars. That's okay. You can stay there for as long as you like, or slip away entirely into dreams. The village will keep its own watch. The river will keep talking. The night will keep folding itself gently around all of it and around you. There is nothing you need to do now. No path to follow, no rope to pull, no leaf to identify. Only this breath, and then the next, and then the next. Gradually stretching out into the soft, wordless dark where stories end and sleep begins. End of story. Sweet dreams!